Welcome back. I'm Barry Craig. Labor Day has come and gone, which means that the political campaign, the fall campaign, is in full swing. And with us today to talk about politics locally and statewide and perhaps nationally is the college's resident political sage, Gerald Watkins. Welcome to the program.
Thank you for your kind introductions. Always fun to be with you, Mr. Barry Craig.
Let's talk about, let's start with the governor's race. Even though we have a whole slate of elections ready for November, people in Kentucky are talking about the governor's race in '07. As a matter of fact, I was heading home from school the other day down in Graves County, my home county, and a truck passed me with a Stumbo in '07 for governor sticker.
We love our politics in Kentucky. It's a great sport, spectator sport, and yeah, people are already, candidates are running and gearing up and trying to get support. And even though, like you said, we got a full slate of elections this year, so many people are already looking ahead till next year. And you have a number of people there, at least 3 Republicans and about somewhere around 12 Democrats who have said that they are seriously considering running for governor of Kentucky next year. So the perceived weakness in the current governor has gotten a lot of people interested in and maybe making that run. So it's going to be interesting to see who all actually jumps out there. But you're right, they're already jumping out there.
One who has jumped back is Trey Grayson, who has announced that he will not seek the Republican nomination for governor. But I believe I read in the Courier-Journal that he also did not endorse Ernie Fletcher's reelection. What does that mean?
That is correct. Trey's mom is from Paducah. He has Western Kentucky connections, and he is, I guess you'd say, the rising star, or certainly one of them, in the Republican Party. He's got a bright future ahead of him. He's only 34 years old. He's very bright and very personable, and he's an excellent leader, and they're looking to him for a future possible governor out of him. And he seriously entertained the idea of getting in the race, but the settlement that dismissed the charges against the sitting governor, Ernie Fletcher, has, I think, probably the biggest reason changed Trey's mind in that now the governor is perceived to be stronger than he was a couple of weeks ago and before the settlement. And Trey has decided to set out this election and wait for another opportunity. And you're right, he didn't endorse the sitting governor, and I think the Republicans just believe that he's a wounded animal and that a lot of them do not believe he can get reelected, and they're still looking, although it won't be Trey Grayson now, they're still looking for an alternative candidate because after waiting, it was 1967 the last time a governor won in Kentucky. Yeah, Louis Nunn. And after waiting all these years, they finally win the governor's mansion, and they wind up with Mr. Fletcher, who's not standing very high in the polls right now. And so they really don't want to wait 30 some odd years again. So they're looking for an alternative candidate.
Who are the alternative candidates out there, perhaps?
Well, Billy Harper from Paducah, a very successful businessman, a very successful business, and races cars on the side. And he's been on the Pritchard Committee and just served on all kinds of not only state but national committees and organizations. He's very bright, and he's got the money. And he was the finance chair for Fletcher's campaign the last time around.
Now that's interesting.
Yeah,
here you have the man that you supported before.
Yeah,
you want his job.
He raised $5 million for him, or helped raise $5 million for him, and now he's going for his job. And I talked to him yesterday, and it's he's leaning very heavily toward running. He's kind of talking to people and hiring a poster and all, and trying to decide whether he should make the run or not. But I think he's leaning toward that he probably will.
Do you think Grayson's withdrawal will affect him?
I think it will just encourage him, because I think Billy really believes that Ernie can't win re-election, and Billy's a leader. He's the kind of person, he wants things done. You know, he wants to get it done yesterday, and so he just feels like that the state needs new leadership, and I suspect that he will get in that race.
Mm-hmm. The thing about Kentucky politics that has interested me, we've talked about this before, in Kentucky, the grand prize has always been the governorship, not a senatorship or a member of the House, but it's the governor's race.
Yeah.
And so here we have all these House races and state races this time, and people are already talking about '07.
Yeah, that's right. It's amazing because I guess if you have national aspirations, you'd want to go to the House or the Senate. But in Kentucky, just about all young politicians, their goal is to be governor of Kentucky. That would be like being president, I guess. They want to be governor of Kentucky, and nothing else would satisfy them. They're not interested in going to Washington, D.C. So it's a very competitive race. The governor's mansion is in Kentucky. You've got the best and the brightest, the most ambitious. They're going for it, and it makes it tough because it's so competitive and so crowded. There are a lot of very talented people who would make good governors, I think, who never get the opportunity, or time just kind of passes them by because the timing just doesn't work, because there's always someone in line for that job. But you can do a lot more as a governor. You're the chief executive. You go to Washington, you're one of 535 members of the House and Senate. And I remember Wendell Ford making a comment about when he was governor of Kentucky, he could make a phone call and people would respond and get things done and listen to him. But when he first went to Washington, D.C. as a U.S. Senator, no, people wouldn't return his phone calls. And he was very frustrated because he couldn't get anything done. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. So it's you're right. Ambitious politicians, they want to be governor.
So right now, we have Billy Harper's hat is in the ring. Fletcher has said he will seek re-election. On the other side, the Democrats, there are a number of names being bandied about. Let's run the laundry list of Democrats. Starting at the top, you would have to say Ben Chandler.
You're right, Barry. Ben Chandler is the man. He was the Democratic nominee last time and ran a very strong race and against the current governor. And then the governor had some coattails to ride on, and the economy and different things were.
Plus, the Republicans hadn't been in for all these years, so
yeah,
I think they were running on the attitude of people's attitude they perceived as let's make a change.
Yeah, and now there are no coattails, and the Republicans are down in the polls at every level. And it just seems like a Democratic year this year and next year, too.
Well, here's the rumor I've heard about Ben Chandler. If the Democrats pick up enough seats to retake the House in November, Chandler will stay where he is. If they don't, he'll run for governor. What do you think of that?
I think you are exactly right. In talking to all the other possible candidates, or I've talked to several of them, and they're all saying the same thing. We're waiting to see what Ben Chandler is going to do. And I've talked to people who know what is on his mind, and he said exactly what you just said. He's going to wait till after this. He would like to be governor of Kentucky. He's always wanted to be.
Like his grandfather.
Yeah, that's right. And his grandfather was. And so he's waiting to see if the Democrats gain control of the House, and the polls are showing that they should or could. If that happens, he would be in line perhaps to be a committee chairman. He'd be in the majority. He could get a lot of things done. He's got a safe seat. I would think he'd probably stay in the House. But if the Democrats don't take control of the House, then he may very well jump in that race for governor. If he does, all the rest of them, at Julian Carroll's early urging, they're staying out of the race. So he doesn't have to run twice and raise and spend money twice. He'll be the only candidate running. Perhaps, and he's the heir apparent, and he'll be the party nominee if he decides to run. And I would say, I'm not a betting person, but if I were, I'd say he should win in the general election. But if he doesn't run, if he decides to stay in the House, then it's really going to open up, and you're not going to have all bets are off. They're all jumping in.
Let's run the list. How about Greg Stumbo? Will he be a candidate for governor in '07? This is all based on the idea that Ben Chandler doesn't run. So how about Greg Stumbo?
Yeah, assuming Ben doesn't run. Greg Stumbo, the Attorney General, he's young. He's always wanted to be governor. He was the House Majority Whip for years, and he'll run. I think that's a definite. If Ben doesn't, I think Greg Stumbo's running. And I think that was partly the reason why you have a settlement reached between the governor and his office to put this investigation behind them. And so I think that was.
Because didn't somebody say as long as this was ongoing, he wouldn't run for governor?
That's right. That's right. So now it's over with. It's settled. There's nothing else left to do in that area. So he can, in his own right and mind, legitimately run and not violate what he said. So he's going to be a candidate.
He'll be a contender.
Yeah, he'll be strong. He'll be strong. He's a good speaker.
Jody Richards, speaking of speaker, House Speaker Jody Richards, will he toss his hat in the ring again with no Ben Chandler?
He will. He's let me know that he's going to. He ran last time and just Ben barely beat him for the Democratic Party nomination, and so House Speaker Jody Richards is very well known. He's really a nice gentleman, good character, and he's got good name recognition. He'll be very strong. He'll be one of the top contenders, but I would say yes, he's running.
Now, he is, of course, the longest-serving House Speaker in history.
Longest-serving House Speaker in Kentucky history, and he's from Bowling Green. A lot of people at this end of the state would like to see a governor from Western Kentucky, and though he's not from Paducah, at least he's the closest one to us that has a chance of being elected. So, and the conventional wisdom is to win Kentucky, you've got to win Western Kentucky. So I would say Jody Richards will always be a strong force, and as the vote split up enough, it's a possibility that he could win that nomination.
Another name you hear, of course, is State Auditor Crit Llewellyn.
Crit Llewellyn will be a strong contender. She, I believe, is the only female that's thinking about making that race, and that counts for something because she will get a lot of the female vote. And she has a lot of experience. She was not tainted by the patent scandal. And she's very intelligent, and she can deliver one heck of a speech, and she has a message, and she's been honing it for a number of months. And Crit Llewellyn is when you size them up and listen to them, she's going to be tough. She's really going to be a strong candidate.
Another name from the central part of the state, from Lexington, is Jonathan Miller, State Treasurer.
Yeah, Jonathan's mom's chair of the political science department at UK, and he just romped in his state treasurer election.
Written a book?
Yeah, he's written a book, been to national conferences on faith, and he's a nice young man and got a lot of character and an excellent speaker, and he's been working hard and traveling the state about as much as anyone has. And the only thing negative about Jonathan is he's young, and he looks even younger, and there's some more seasoned politicians out there, but Jonathan will be in close to the top tier, and obviously if he doesn't win the nomination, he would certainly be a strong candidate for lieutenant governor for somebody, a running mate for someone, but Jonathan don't want to dismiss him because he's going to be strong too.
Another name that you hear perhaps on the outside is former Governor Brereton Jones.
Yeah, Brereton is still ambitious, and he would like to be governor again. And he last time he went around talking to a few people who had supported him before when he won for some input, and decided not to make the race. But he's also talking again, and by virtue of being a former governor, he's well known, obviously, and he had an army of support before. I wouldn't put him in the top 3, but I think he certainly is someone, again, that you can't dismiss because anyone who's served as governor, he has good name recognition, and in a highly split up field, he could win the nomination. But since he's been interested in it for a while, I would think he would have to think, well, if I'm ever going to get in it, now's a good time. So he may jump in it too.
Another blast from the past. I've heard Terry McBrayer's name mentioned, Julian Carroll's Commerce Commissioner, and
yeah.
friend from the legislature years ago, Greenup County.
Yeah, that's right. He makes the circuit, at least in central Kentucky, and he's got excellent name recognition and highly respected, and knows an awful lot of people. And I think you could do very well. I don't think you'll win it. I think people want a new, fresh face, so to speak, and he's too much of a blast from the past, or too far in the past. So I respect Terry McBrayer, and he'll run strong, but I don't expect him to win the nomination. But I wouldn't be a bit surprised if he doesn't get in it.
Any chance of the former governor from Heath, Julian Carroll. You know, his name keeps surfacing, and he keeps denying it, and the name surfaces. He denies. What do you think?
That rumor's been going around now for a couple of years, and he's all over the state. And for a good period of time, we were kiddingly asking him about that, and he would always say, well, I'm just interested in retaking and getting control of the state Senate back and help develop some new leadership, and then, you know, I'll fade into the past. But I'm not so sure that's the case, because he did say here recently in an interview that if he were younger, he would run again for governor. But he really doesn't have the energy level that he used to have, so he'd be glad to be someone's running mate. And he mentioned Ben Chandler. He said he thought that if Ben Chandler were the nominee, that he would make a great running mate for him, because Ben needs Western Kentucky, and he could win Western Kentucky. And he's got the experience, having been House Speaker and President of the State Senate. He knows state government, and Julian has a lot of wisdom, and he's probably a better public speaker than any of them.
And that's dropping a pretty broad hint, too, I would say.
That is. That is.
So who we left out among Democratic contenders?
Dr. Daniel Mangiardo,
Yes.
state senator from Eastern Kentucky.
Who almost was elected to the Senate.
That's right. He is very bright, and he's conservative, and very telegenic, and he ran a strong race and almost knocked off Senator Jim Bunning. Daniel Mangiardo, he's a great speaker, and if he decides to make, he's going to run for something, either the governor next year or the U.S. Senate again, one or the other. I'm not sure which, but he's going to be one strong candidate, whichever race he decides to get in. And if he runs for governor, I would put him in. I think he'd be in the top 3. He'll be a strong candidate.
Who else?
Gatewood Galbraith.
Oh, yes. Always fun. Always fun.
Can't leave him out. He just wrote a book, The Last Free Man Standing.
And the picture of him standing on the front with a machine gun, I thought there was an ammunition around him. He was in the Labor Day parade, of course, and he was also handing out autographed copies of his book. So he's decided to run as a Democrat this time rather than independent, which he has before.
Well, that's right. His biggest liability, he's a great public speaker, but his biggest liability is the largest plank in his platform is to legalize marijuana. I heard him in a speech at Fancy Farm several years ago when he was running, I think, for agricultural secretary. He was, I mean, the way he described marijuana, you would think it was manna from heaven. He said it would, we could make our clothes from it. We wouldn't have to import these fabrics anymore. There's enough petroleum in the leaves that we could become energy independent from the Mideast oil. And that if you ate it, there was enough, all the essential nutrients and vitamins, you wouldn't need Wonder Bread anymore. That it has all the essential vitamins and nutrients our bodies need. I mean, to Gatewood Galbraith, it's a wonder drug. But the most he's ever got is 10%, but that might be enough to affect the nomination process.
In all seriousness, not that I think he would have a chance of winning, but in a crowded field, it wouldn't take a big slice to win this thing.
No, if you have 10 or 12 candidates running, one person, if they all run decently strong, I mean, you know, you could 15% of the vote and you win the nomination.
So that's wide open, and again,
it is. You got Charlie Owen, you know, Louisville,
the perennial millionaire candidate,
Louisville businessman.
Right.
He's out and about, and it appears as though he's going to run again. So.
Yeah.
Lots of people.
And it all depends on what Ben Chandler does.
Yeah.
Well, let's switch, if we can, to maybe some congressional races. The 1st Congressional District, Ed Whitfield, a multi-term incumbent now, is being challenged by the man who lost his job to Whitfield way back when. That's Tom Barlow. How do you size that race up?
Normally, you would say, hey, Ed Whitfield's the incumbent. He's been there since 1994. His margin just keeps increasing.
Every time.
2 years ago, he won 65% of the vote. He spends about $1.2 or $3 million on average every 2 years. Normally, you would think that's suicide, you know, just to get out there and try. But this year is a different year with all these issues, the war in Iraq, the price of petroleum, the response to Hurricane Katrina, the scandals in Washington, D.C., and for us in Frankfurt. And if you look at all the polls, they're all showing that people are dissatisfied. They want to change. And Tom Barlow has excellent name recognition. He surprises people. He never spends a lot of money, but he gets out there and walks and works hard, and he gets a lot more votes than people expect him to.
Well, if you go back to when Barlow upset Carol Hubbard, that has to be one of the biggest political upsets in Kentucky history.
I would think so, because when Barlow first challenged Hubbard in 1986, he got, I think it was 18% of the vote, if I remember correctly, and then he turns around in 92 and knocks him off.
And that's amazing.
Yeah, Tom runs stronger than most of the time than people think that he will. And if you look at all the polls, I mean, someone was discussing yesterday a poll in Christian County that if it was accurate, that showed Barlow ahead. And if that's the case, there might be a surprise in November.
Well, he's a guy that I think you underestimate at your peril. He doesn't have much money, doesn't spend much money. He sort of runs an under-the-radar campaign.
Yeah.
And that'll be interesting.
The issues are on his side, and he's
but
working
of course,
hard.
But then the money's on Whitfield's side.
That's
and
true.
The power of incumbency. And all incumbents, Republicans, Democrats, doesn't matter. Around election time, they come handing out checks and showing what a good fellow they've been, a good steward they've been in Washington.
That's right. Tom's got a tough election ahead of him, but he at least, the issues are such that he has a possibility of winning.
Some of the state races locally to watch, we have in Frank Rash, multi-term Democratic incumbent, being challenged by Bruce Brockenborough, Republican. Might call him a maverick Republican, I guess.
He is. He's not your standard Republican. He sounds more like a Democrat. He's a populist, and very intelligent and an excellent speaker. He's got a really nice personality, very engaging, and he's out there working awfully hard, and obviously he has money to spend. And Frank's been there a long time. In the 3rd District, Paducah, Frank should have the advantage, and Frank doesn't have any negative. I mean, his family is highly respected. He's a nice guy, and I've never heard anyone say anything negative about him. And it's not, Bruce doesn't have any coattails to run on as a Republican. And Frank's working harder now. He realizes he has to wake up and get busy. He's had it pretty easy since he won in '92. He's never had an opponent. So he's having to get out there and make up for lost time, but he's doing it. And so that should be a pretty competitive race. Again, Frank being the incumbent, in the makeup of the district, he should have the advantage, but it's not a given.
Okay, moving over on the river. So the river counties of Ballard, Carlisle, Hickman, and Fulton. You've got a race between Stephen Rudy, the first-term Republican incumbent, versus Tom French from that area. Now, is it true, being a political science professor, that the best time to get an incumbent is the first time the incumbent has to run for re-election?
Yeah, you're right, Barry.
If Rudy is vulnerable, this is when it would be.
That's exactly right. If you can't, assuming they don't defeat themselves, to do something to defeat themselves, if you can't knock them off the first time they're up for re-election, then stay home and forget it. So Stephen's going to be most vulnerable this election year. And Stephen's a real nice guy. He used to be a student out here and comes from a well-known, well-respected family, and that was his biggest asset, his father. Everybody recognizes that's why Stephen won, because of Jack. But Stephen's a nice guy, and he's coming into his own. He's young, and he's moderate. He's not extreme at all, extremely partisan, and can work across the aisle. So he has a lot going for him, and he won big against a long-time incumbent.
Charles Jeviden, right.
55% of the vote, and that wasn't even close. So Stephen is stronger than most, first-term House members would be, and especially a Republican in a district that's probably 80% Democratic. But Tom French, career Coast Guard, he's working hard, and he's making some powerful speeches. And Julian's coming down to campaign for him this next week. So I expect that to be a competitive race, but the only negative Stephen has is it's not a good year for Republicans, probably. But people you know, they're not real party loyal anyway, so it may not hurt him. So I would expect Stephen would be awfully hard to unseat.
In Grace County, Fred Nessler has no opponent. Moving over to Callaway County, Kemp versus Melvin Henley. We've got 3 minutes. Let's make this one fast.
Okay, Melvin Henley's going to win in a romp.
Well, that is
Kemp's a nice guy, but he's no match, I don't think.
That's pretty succinct. The other races moving to the east of us, Mike Cherry has no opposition, so we're pretty sure he'll win that one.
You should.
Should on that one. Got to get one vote, don't you?
Yeah, that's right.
Okay. And then, of course, that leaves the last race to talk about, and that is State Representative J.R. Gray of Benton is being challenged by Eddyville attorney Marvin Wilson. That race was somewhat close 2 years ago. How about this time around?
Well, repeat from 2 years ago, and JR just barely escaped last time around. But again, the issues are different. His opponent had long coattails from the president and the Republicans, and this time he doesn't. It's a very negative for him, and he's not getting the support that he did 2 years ago. And JR is out there working hard, and JR's record is not being misrepresented this time like it was last time. So I think J.R. Gray is too valuable, and he's too strong, and people realize that. I think, 2-1, it's going to be a romp for J.R. this time around. I don't see Marvin this time as doing nearly as well as he did 2 years ago.
And last, but certainly not least, is the state Senate race here in McCracken and Ballard and Marshall counties, featuring the incumbent, Bob Leeper, the Republican challenger, Archer, and the Democrat, former Congressman Carol Hubbard. So Bob Leeper, Neil Archer, Carol Hubbard. I think we've got about a minute left or so. How about that one?
We wrap this up in a minute. This is probably the most watched legislative race in the entire state. A former 18-year congressman, excellent name recognition. A lot of older people love him. Remember the things that he did for them while he was in Congress. Bob Leeper, 16-year incumbent. Everybody likes Bob personally. Some people don't like the fact that he was a Democrat, a Republican, an independent. Neil Archer, very bright. But you got a three-way split here, and probably the Republican side, the more conservative side, they're splitting their vote between Neil Archer and Bob Leeper. If you just look at the math, Carol Hubbard should win it, but Bob Leeper, he raised $60-some-odd thousand, most he ever has in 16 years for this race, so he's a factor. That this is a race that it's too close to call. I think all three of them are going to run strong. Again, Hubbard should get the nod, but it's Bob Leeper's in there, and Neil Archer's not out of there. He's in it too. So any one of them, it's that 2 months to go. Any one of them could win.
And there you have it. We're out of time. I'm Barry Craig. My guest today was Gerald Watkins. Good for you to join us, and we'll pin Gerald down on these predictions, by the way. And see you next time.